and are just some of the words that you may hear in today's podcast. Enjoy!
Hello and welcome to the Perfect Information Podcast, a board game podcast of slow and gradual recoveries with me, Yorgos Panagiotidis, and the guy who insomnia calls when it's at a loose end.
Ben Maddox.
My eyes are again bright, Georgios, and bushy, and looking out at the world through cleanness and health.
Well, your eyes are bushy?
My eyes are bushy, yeah. The thing is,
Have you hairy eyeballs?
I'm human 2.0, Georgios, and what it is the next stage of evolution is hair that grows out of the eyeballs will simultaneously gives you feeling, protection, and quite beautiful, like, hair locks, eye locks.
Honestly, I think you're just a mutant. You should be locked up.
That's true. If anyone exhibits any difference whatsoever,
Yes.
whether that be physical or sociological, they should be condemned roundly for it.
Well, you should devote their life to science, as in, be cut open and, figured out by science.
Well, if I'm looking...
That's what devoting your life to science means, right?
If I'm looking for sections, Georgios, the vivisection is always my favourite.
That was a great pun.
Vivian-section. She screams a lot.
It's getting progressively worse.
Anyway, Georgios.
Maybe leave the puns to the professionals.
Who are the professionals, Georgios? Me. Ben Pun Maddox is my middle name.
Couldn't
think of a pun there. Rather undermines my claim somewhat.
Sorry, your name is Ben Pun Maddox. Maddox?
Yes. Haven't you heard of Ford Maddox Ford, the famous early 20th century American writer, Georgios?
Did your parents stutter during your birth?
It's a painful thing, childbirth. I mean, you can't use, my mother was doing a voiceover job at the time whilst giving birth to me. You don't know what Britain was like in the 1970s, Georgios. You just got to do voiceover jobs on the side just to make ends meet.
While you give birth.
She couldn't take time off, Georgios. This is the 70s, the 3-day week, the winter of discontent, Georgios.
The discontent. All right, go on.
Margaret Thatcher and all of that. And so, the priest who was also there at the time, because that's how it worked in the 70s, the priest who gives you your name
right
when you're coming out.
That's where it was in England.
That's why there's such a lot of people born in the late 70s, Georgios, whose name is because they were very literal men, some of these priests. Obviously. And she said, I would like to call him, because nominative determinism, I would like to call him Ben Pun Maddox. And the priest said, you do realise that would be a repetition of Maddox? And she said, I'm trying to do an advert for Leyland Cars here whilst giving birth. Write it down, dog collar man. And so he wrote it down, and that's my name, Ben Pun Maddox. And I think nominative determinism has worked out, hasn't it, Georgios? Because I'm the pun master.
Yeah, I think we now have reached our contractually obliged quota of personal background story. We can now devote the rest of the time talking about things people want to hear.
So what are we talking about this week, Georgios?
I have no idea. This topic was not mine.
So I want to talk about Community.
Oh, it's a great show. I love that. 6 seasons and a movie, although only the first 3 were good.
I don't want to drop in any popular culture references, make any jokes about...
Right.
About the Texan girl or whatever who's in it or something.
Donde está la biblioteca?
And that lad who thinks he's a sexy and that. There's the main guy thinks he's super sexy, and they play this joke that he's super sexy. We're not talking about fucking Community, the sitcom, Georgios.
Great show.
We're talking about board games as a community. Is it a community? Do we aspire for it to be a community? Is all that a myth? Is all this attempt to build a community around the whole thing, whether that be virtual, whether that be face to face, whether that is in vain, whether that is necessary. Are we fundamentally just ships that pass in the night, or can we get something valuable, profound and deep from not just the games we play, but the people we play them with, Georgios? That's what we're talking about today.
All right, the answer is yes.
Good. Well, I'm going to go and watch Community.
Excellent.
From Dan Harmon. So, first of all, have you developed a community around your board gaming? Did you have a community previously? And has that changed? And is that valuable to you?
I don't know how typical my experience is with my gaming group, and that it sort of more or less grew out of my role-playing group semi-organically. And then I just went scouting for new players when I could find them.
Was board gaming a compensation for the loss of time as you got older? So can't do RPGs anymore because they're so involving that we'll just go on to board games. Was it like that for you?
No, it was more along the lines of I would like to play more than once every 2 or 3 months. And since we can't get our schedules to actually work together, we'll just do something that doesn't rely on every one of us being there every time we meet.
Well, that's what I just said, no?
No, there's a lot of time that goes into role-playing outside of them sitting down and playing it itself.
Yeah. So as you get older, when you get responsibilities, this is everyone.
That issue started when we were about in the early 20s. So, that was not a time of a lot of responsibilities time-wise. It's just a case of we have a bunch of things we want to do. We have a bunch of friends we want to meet. And sometimes we don't feel like sitting down to play a role-playing game. And instead of, that hobby falling by the wayside because one person decides to do something else that night, I more or less started, dealing with other things because they seemed interesting.
Well, go back to this community thing. Was this, so it became birthed from your RPG thing?
Yeah, more or less, yeah.
Was the reason that you wanted to spend time with these people, or were these people just props to enable you to play games?
I don't think this is an either or question. I don't think this is ever an either or question. I think to a certain extent, the desire to play a game and the desire to spend time with people coincides. And for the most part, people fulfill both roles.
Well, I guess the question I'm asking, were the people themselves fundamental to it? Or if you could have just drummed up another 4 or 5 people, if it hadn't taken the effort, could have been anybody?
No.
As long as the game was in the middle of the table?
No, I think I learned, again, my role-playing experience helped me there. I learned fairly early on that I want to pick the people I want to spend time with. I want to very consciously invite people to my place to play board games because I want to spend time with them. Or at the very least, because I don't mind spending time with them. I think that still applies to everyone I asked to come over for Friday night game night.
Because we were talking about this. I think we were talking about this over Essen.
All right.
And we were talking about friends and gaming.
Yes.
And I said to you that I don't really have any friends who I game with, certainly not in Berlin. Right. I have people who I'm acquainted with, people who I know, but not people, apart from maybe one person excluded, who I would really call friends, people I would choose to hang around with if the game wasn't on the table.
But that's an odd definition, though.
No, I don't think it is an odd definition.
I think it is, though.
It's someone you just choose, someone you enjoy spending time with.
Yes.
Now, it's nice if there's a game there or there's not a game there, but most of the people I think of in Berlin, we wouldn't get together unless there was a game in the middle of the table. And that's not how I would define a friend.
I don't know. I think people I only meet by way of games, I would still consider friend because of how I feel about them, how close I am to them. And the fact that our common or shared interest happens to be games and only games doesn't mean I'm not friends with them. I mean, there are people who I only meet once a year when I'm in Essen, but that doesn't mean they're not convention acquaintances. I still consider them my friends.
Yeah, but that's a different thing though, isn't it?
Why?
Because there are people I only see once a year, or maybe even less than that.
Right.
But that's a geographic consideration. It's just not practical for us to get together.
And in these cases with the people I played board games with, it's the fact that this is a shared interest that gives us a reason to all come together at the same time.
I'm trying to think. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to think of if one of these people, for instance, just decided one day they weren't into it anymore. They just didn't want to play games anymore.
Right.
I can't think of many people within my board gaming group in Berlin that I would continue to have contact with. Because, well, I like, and I would consider a friend, I would consider a friend someone who I just like spending time with, that I want to spend time with, that I want to help, that I want to help me if they're moving or they need someone to run an errand for them because they're looking after their kids or whatever, just normal friend stuff. And they just said to me one day, I'm really not into gaming anymore. I'm happy to meet for a coffee. That would be cool. There's so few of those people in my board game community that I would happily assent to that.
I don't know. I think, one thing I noticed, I've observed this in the past, especially when I was talking to some of my nerdier friends or acquaintances, if you want to call them that. There's a certain deification of friendship, of the concept of friendship, that a friend is someone extraordinary, somebody special, somebody who has this deep, meaningful connection to you.
And what's the problem with that?
It sort of ignores the fact that you can be friends in all kinds of ways, and you don't have to put friendship on a pedestal.
Well, it's not even this. It's not even this deep connection, because we all have stratas of friends.
Oh, yeah, of course.
We have very close friends, and then we have leading out to the bleeding edges of acquaintance. Now, I have people in my life that are definitely acquaintances, even though I've seen them many times, and I may even see them weekly. There are certainly people at Board Game Group who I wouldn't consider friends. And there are people who I would consider friends, but certainly not to the degree of other people.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, go on.
And it's not about the deification of friendship. I think it's, for me, how I'm defining this now, is if the game wasn't there, would I still sit around and want to chat with them? And
yeah, I know, I get that definition, but I think my approach is differently. My approach is much more self-centered. It's literally, how do I feel about them? It doesn't have to do with how do I spend my time with them? How do I want to spend my time with them? When do I spend my time with them? It's literally, how do I feel about them? Do I look forward to spending time with them?
Yeah, but
not?
It's the same thing, right?
I think, yeah, it has to be, to a certain extent, it has to be the same thing. We're talking about the same topic, but I think the approach is different.
Because I'm
not using external factors. That's, I think, the difference.
Well, the point is, if I know nothing about a person, if we don't really converse very much,
right.
If there's a game in the middle of the table, that is not a factor. Who that person is, as long as they're tolerable people, right? As long as they're not assholes, as long as they don't, as long as they don't act in a way that ruins everyone's experience, as long as they don't say horrible racist or sexist shit, then fundamentally it doesn't matter. This is the con experience, right? This is the sitting at a table with new people and playing a game.
Right.
This is utilizing people as aids to fundamentally facilitate your good time.
Yeah. I don't have this experience. We mentioned this in earlier episodes that your gaming group generally seems to, you have more experiences with a random collection of gamers sitting down to play games with you, where I have a more or less stable group of the same 6, 7, 8 people who I meet with constantly. And if you want to be clinical and cynical, the sheer sense of repetition and familiarity,
ease,
leads effectively morphs into friendship.
All right, so we've sort of gone down a cul-de-sac of definition here, which is inevitable, but not bad. So we participate in gaming in two different types of community, right?
Yes.
You have a regular group of people, and I have a disparate group of people by and large. What does your community give you?
Wow.
Because there must be a reason that you've perpetuated it for the last, decades or whatever.
I have to admit, I had never sat down and thought about it in this way. Just, it's a group of people I like to sit down with and play games with. And it's, whenever I do that, 9 times out of 10, it's a fun and satisfying experience. And I look forward to doing it again next week. And that's the whole of it.
But what? So what's the bonus? Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll highlight what I think about my sort of community experience and how that then relates to yours. Okay. So the obvious advantage to the way I conduct my gaming life if I could think of a more pretentious phrase, I would be much more pretentious, but is that there's always people there, right?
Right.
There's always people there. If I arrange a game night, unless it's a game that's over 6 months old because everyone's a dreadful hipster, then I don't have an issue filling up the spots, right? I can play, as I've said it on the podcast before, I could play every night if I wished. Mm-hmm. And I have enough games to be able to fulfill that. And sometimes I go through phases of arranging 4 or 5 game nights a night when I'm really in the mood to play. You know? But the obvious disadvantage is, and I guess part of the reason why I say I don't really have any board gaming friends in Berlin is that because it's so transient, because it's so disparate and there's so many different kinds of people, it's very difficult to develop relationships with these people. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to operate on any other level than just 2 gamers playing a game.
Right, yeah.
For them, I'm the guy who has the flat and the game. For me, they're the people who help me facilitate playing the game I want to play.
Right.
And it very, very rarely transcends from that into something more serious. And serious is a bad word. Something more personal, I guess. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting if you look at Essen. Mm-hmm. Okay? There was a couple of people I spoke to at Essen who I see once a year, and I had better conversations with them than I have had with the majority of people who live in Berlin and I game with regularly in the last year.
Yeah.
I would much easier categorize them as friends than the people who live 2 miles down the road away from me, right? Mm-hmm. So my community offers me ease, it offers me regularity, but what it doesn't offer me is familiarity and depth. Mm-hmm. Referring to that, what does your community offer you?
I guess regularity in a sense. Familiarity, yes, these things. I think there's a certain sense of stability that now we're getting into weird metaphysical
Be as metaphysical as you like, love.
Well, maybe epistemological. I love writing the word. I can't say it though. In the sense that once you sort of are somewhat familiar with what a person likes or dislikes, what their way of looking at things is, it's very helpful to get their opinion on a topic, and especially in this case on games. So if we've played a game together, and they either criticize or value something about the game, I can easily have the right frame of reference to understand what they're trying to say, what they mean, or where I might differ in their analysis. And that's really helpful. And that helps me to sort of have different perspectives on one game and helps me understand what it is that I was doing, helps me understand my experience, helps me understand some of the intricacies of the design work or the graphical design, stuff like that. So that helps me. It's, I think again, the more I think about it, I've never actually thought about my gaming group in that way. It is the sense of familiarity, just seeing the same faces come round, like familiar faces, sit down, shared experiences. And ultimately that's, I think, what makes friendships. It's not something supernatural, deeply meaningful. It's the fact that these are people that you like and that you get to spend time with again and again.
I'm lamenting this at the moment.
Right.
Because I had a rotten Essen.
Yeah.
And also then yesterday I had a bit of a fractious experience playing a game.
Yeah, right.
And part of me just said, well, if this guy was a friend rather than an acquaintance, I would know how to deal with this situation.
Okay.
Whereas there are so many people who, and this happens, and I'm guilty of this too. There are so many people who act like whining bloody babies when something doesn't go their way over a game. And they act completely out of proportion to the gravity of the situation. Mm-hmm. And because there's no familiarity there, because they're not friends there, I don't have a way of adequately dealing with them in diffusing the situation that's good for all parties. When you know someone well and they're reacting, you know if this is a regular thing, you know if there must be something up because they don't usually act in this way, and you know each other well enough to be able to interact with each other in a way that will diffuse the situation to the satisfaction of everyone else. Yesterday, what happened? Someone fucking went mental. Everyone looked at the table until he'd finished going mental. Then we carried on playing in an atmosphere that was miserable for 15 minutes.
All right.
And I was sat there just thinking, why did you have to do that? Why did you have to lose your shit there? Because now everyone's pissed off, and I don't know you well enough to pick you up on it. and it takes a real egregious stepping over the bounds for me to go, look, you need to shut up. And it certainly wasn't that,
Yeah. I think you pointed out that I told this story at least twice on the podcast before, so I'm not going to repeat it. But there was one instance where, with a game of Fury of Dracula, faithful listeners might remember that anecdote, where I realized that what you just said, I need to step up if I'm hosting a game night at my place, regardless of how often these people show up. I became much more aware of my responsibility as not just as the host. I mean, I feel like to some extent, I am responsible, even if I'm not.
I mean,
sorry, let me just finish the thought. And there's another game we occasionally visit where I feel like occasionally I need to step in to diffuse the situation because there's just so much tension there that's, I guess, based on old grievances and grudges and what have you.
It's surprising the degree to which you feel that responsibility as the host. So yesterday, I walked away from that experience thinking I should have done something there.
Yeah.
Whereas just because they're in my flat doesn't really put more weight of responsibility on to police people not being dickheads around a table.
You think so?
Well, clearly it does, but the problem is, it needs to be egregious and it needs to be obvious. But someone comes in and starts fucking saying really nasty things. That's easily stamped downable. Someone gets mad playing a game.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard. Do I step in now? Is it going to diffuse? Do I make it worse?
Do you know what I started doing at some point? I mean, I've these moments where somebody really stepped over the line and I had to say something have been very, very rare.
Yeah.
But what I did notice is that when I see somebody behaving within the game, within the confines of the game, in a way that I find unacceptable, that I find attacking a certain player who's more or less openly signaling that he is not fine with it, that he's not up for it, that this is not what he came to game night for, whatever, or just any kind of trollish, bullying-like behavior, I've started sort of aiming for these people, like really aggressively attacking them within the game, because there's a small, very, very passive-aggressive way of sort of shutting them down. Because like, yes, you're the great, great big hero, but now I'm going to cut you down because that's not on at my game table. You don't step on the weak, so to speak. I started doing this. It just became a habit. I don't want to use the word policing because that sounds oppressive. But I am aware of I can influence the tone at the table by the way I make my decisions, by the way I talk about my decisions, by the way I talk about other people's decisions. I can signal, you're stepping over the line here without actually saying these words. I can make jokes to signal like you've done enough. You don't need to get that extra victory point because, he's having a miserable time. Back off.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And because I guess we did another show where we talk about burnout.
Yes.
And I'm certainly not experiencing burnout with games at the moment.
Oh no, Essen is great to do in doing the exact opposite for me.
But I'm experiencing a kind of frustration at not having people I dependably like to play games with.
Ah, yeah.
So I'm getting to that point now where I'm kind of thinking, well, you're great as a body to play games against, but I quite like to like you too. I quite like to value.
Yeah.
And so this is why it's a preoccupation. So building outwards now, there is a broader community that exists on Twitter, that exists on BGG, that exists on Facebook.
Sure.
Is it a myth?
No. See, I was kind of hoping we could sort of do a shorter show this time around and just do one-word answers.
So every time, from now on, every time I ask a closed question, just give me a one-word answer. That'd be great.
Okay.
That's good radio.
Yeah, definitely is. Yeah, I think the word myth is misleading here because myth has this connotation of being false, of being untrue, of being a mirage, being an illusion. And I think that's not the case. It's a myth only in the sense that it is a kind of narrative, little story we tell ourselves to make sense of things, to understand how we relate to other people. In this case, how do we relate to other gamers on Twitter? How do we relate to other users on Board Game Geek? How do we relate to the other people shopping at our local game shop? We relate to them because we're all part of the same community. We recognize or see something familiar in them, this fun and enjoyment, appreciation of board games or games in general. That sort of gives us an idea. All right, there's some commonality between us. We kind of belong in some category together, and that makes it easier to approach each other, to be around each other, interact with each other.
I mean, I think in one aspect where it certainly isn't a myth, and post Essen, this is good to talk about because it's sort of fresh in my memory.
Right.
So I think about Dan Hughes and Mike Poole, for instance.
Dancing shoes.
Exactly. And the Crafty Players.
Yeah.
And Rico from Sweden with his girlfriend, whose name, sorry, I can't remember, but who really hates background noise.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
There's no effort when you meet them.
Yes.
There's none of that. You've already jumped over that initial hurdle.
Yeah, they already heard the best and the worst our minds can offer, yeah.
Right, but it's not just that we do podcasts and stuff. It's just that you interact with them over the Facebook groups or over Twitter or whatever. So there's an establishment there. You walk in knowing if the conversation flags a little bit, and I think conventions are unique sort of experience. But as the conversation flags, I know I've got something I can talk about that we're going to be mutually interested in.
Yeah.
But I guess because I go through this sort of angsty stuff occasionally. There's a line in Creep by Radiohead, right?
You're quoting Radiohead.
I am.
God Lord.
Which is, I want you to notice when I'm not around. And this whole thing of community, I just wonder whether anyone would give a flying fuck if I drop dead tomorrow. And
no, nobody. But that's just the way of life.
And the point is,
that's nihilism.
Should I expect this community to give a fuck either? Because, I spent so much time in this virtual world, looking on the Facebook page, going to BGG, speaking to people on our guild and on Facebook and on Twitter, that I spent such a majority of my time. If this had been 50 years ago and this was the Lions organization or your local rugby team or football, if I dropped down dead, people would notice and some of them would give a fuck, right? And I just wonder whether this community is a myth because fundamentally, if I removed myself from the community and dropped out, obviously dramatic, but if I removed myself from the community tomorrow, I don't think anyone would care. And I think that's pretty much the same for all of us, apart from a few people who do a lot of content.
I don't know about that. I don't know about any of that.
Well, then disabuse me of this. If you don't know about any of it.
I think what we're seeing here, first let's start with the easy point. The comparison you made about the football club, I guess, and the community of the board game community now. I don't think those two are comparable because basically one is face to face and the other is not, and it's a small detail, but I think it's a fundamental one.
I think it's the fundamental.
And ultimately, community, as we used to understand it, meant shared physical space. It meant seeing people regularly. It meant basically the kind of group I have is closer to what we understand as community as the kind of group that builds on board game or builds online in this virtual sphere.
So is the word community a misnomer?
I think it raises certain expectations and brings along certain assumptions that might be misleading. I think what we do have in the online community, for lack of a better term, is some sort of commonality, is something. But because our connection is so limited, we have just this one tiny little channel of communication with each other. It becomes something else, not lesser, but different. And I think, so the online community of gamers we know, the kind of people we might interact with online, be it Facebook, Twitter, Board Game Geek, I think they are a kind of community, but we can't think of them, we shouldn't think of them the same way we think of other communities. I think they operate under different rules, different dynamics, different changes. That example you mentioned, if I were to disappear, would anybody care? Doesn't apply quite in the same way because you basically disappear the moment you stop writing. You just happen to appear again the moment you start writing, and the moment you start speaking again, the moment you start uploading your new episode of whatever it is you do. So I don't know. I think
that's such an interesting contradiction with board games, right? Because a lot of people talk about board games because what they bring you is physical proximity with people in an age where we feel atomized.
Right,
and you have this whole other side, which is exactly that, which is atomization. I mean, it's a brilliant way of explaining it, that you disappear the minute you start typing. You do. And you only reappear when you start typing again. And it seems so at odds. And I think we as a race, we as an animal, as a species, and this is why the internet is so problematic, I think, for us at the moment, because we're taking our first, we've come out of the primordial soup of analog communication into this great landmass that's the internet now. And we haven't managed to delineate that well enough yet.
Yeah.
We speak to a person enough on Twitter, we think they're our friend, when in reality, they're not, I guess.
Oh, I wouldn't be so grim about that. No, I think they are somebody to us the moment they reply and the moment we engage with each other, the moment that you start a dialogue. They are somebody, something to us. I don't think that relation maps onto friendship in a one-to-one way.
It's confusing.
It's confusing. Yes, I agree with you. I think that it's something. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable calling any of the people I interacted with online friends yet. But that doesn't mean I don't appreciate the interactions we have. It doesn't mean I don't value, when somebody says something very interesting, insightful, and I feel compelled to respond. I enjoy those moments. I feel like, this is a kind of virtual human connection that's happening right now. And I love that. Still, friendship to me is something strongly analog, and the digital version of it works under different parameters.
It is so interesting. It's so interesting so there's a guy who does football podcasts, right? Who's, I would say he's the epitome of it.
Right.
And I've only heard his voice up until sort of like 2 years ago. Tim Vickery is his name. And he started doing TV stuff. And when I first saw him on TV, I thought, that's not you. Because you build this picture of someone.
Yeah, it's literally the response we got when we uploaded our Essen video. It's like, I thought you would be different. You look differently.
And it really is difficult to sort of quantify who a person is until you have, because we are still fundamentally Homo sapiens, right?
Yes.
We're not Homo digitalis yet. We haven't moved to that next. I just came up with that. It was good, wasn't it?
No.
Hey, I complimented you on your disappear when you're typing thing. Homo digitalis is fucking amazing. But yeah, so I think it's really difficult. And there are people you assume you'll like.
Yeah.
And this is the thing with the community thing. The whole board game community, we're linked by this thing. Community seems to be complimenting it much too much with a word that has that connotation. Unless the word shifts in meaning, and then the other meaning of community, the football team, the Lions club, the local go out on a Friday night, have a curry club.
Right.
Then community for that loses its power.
Yeah, I think, again, I want to be very clear that I do not wish to in any way devalue the concept of online communities. I think they're valuable, but I do think that once you start sitting down thinking about it, like we do in the show in this very moment, about to what extent is the online community, the board gaming community, the international board game community, a community outside of the ways in which we interact personally, you realize that the word community is ill-equipped to describe this thing. It does not fit exactly what it is. It's something else. It has its strengths, but it obviously also has its weaknesses. It's very, very susceptible to negative impulses from the outside, as the last 10 years have clearly shown. But it can also be a source of great strength and of solidarity for some people, for people who find themselves in a situation where they do need to find someone who shares their beliefs, their interests, their experiences. And I think that is something that your regular meat body community can't always provide.
Is it ever more than superficial? Or am I or am I looking at it in the wrong way? Am I expecting too much? Am I mapping my old analog expectations onto something that is just not designed in that way?
I think that might be it. I think expecting the online community to map to be a replica of, say, a stable, strong, solid, reliable face-to-face community, it will raise expectations that reality cannot fulfill, I think. You have to take the online community for what it is. Not necessarily superficial, but your interaction is by definition very, very limited. You have to work very, very hard on making what little interaction you have worthwhile, making it last, being cognizant of what you do and what you say and how it gets perceived and how you perceive the things that people send out online. I think all these things, when we started sitting down to record this episode, I didn't really expect to go into this direction, and I never really expected to be all that interested. But now I find online community is very, very exciting. Yeah.
I suggest something, and then you look at me with just this weary look of, why have you opened your bloody mouth again?
Yeah, that is true. That is accurate.
Didn't I bloody tell you? Do I have to go and get the fucking cattle prod again?
Well, I was halfway there, but you said no, we don't have batteries anyway, so you got out of this time.
Well, if you want to hear me getting cattle prodded by Georgios more, patreon.com/perfect information.
Is that your name on the list? Well, get in there then. Get to the bar and get buckled. Welcome to the guild.
Oof, Georgios, I'm tuckered out.
What's tuckering? Is that some sort of odd sex act?
No, it's not a sex thing.
Put on a bow tie and spout stupid opinions?
It means I'm tired, Georgios. It means I've had a week of hard yet satisfying
tuckering.
Looking forward to my upcoming nuptials, Georgios. It's surprising how much hard work it is looking through wedding magazines and choosing dresses and invitations and that.
I wouldn't know. I've knowingly avoided that contraption.
Oh, but Georgios, it's beautiful.
No, it isn't.
To see the radiant smile on young Janine's face when she says, "Oh, that would be good, wouldn't it?" And I'm thinking, "No, we can't afford it, Janine." And I say, "Yes." And then she says, "But you should wear this one, this suit with an attached codpiece." And I think, "Oh, that would be interesting, wouldn't it, Janine?" Oh, Georgios, what have I done?
You've bored me to bits is what you've done. Are you having cold feet?
No,
regrets?
I want to get married, Georgios.
No, you don't. Nobody wants to get married.
I just can't organise things, and I'm being expected to organise things, and there's even talk of me going on the Atkins so I can get in my suit, Georgios.
I think you have a very good idea of what marriage is like then. You're asked to do things you're not equipped to handle, and then you deal with the consequences.
Anyway, so I'm hoping that the responses of the beautiful people will take my mind off this organisational, bureaucratic, I don't want to listen to the theme from Lord of the Rings when I'm going up the aisle nightmare that I'm entering, Georgios.
Oh yeah, procrastination has always been the solution to all of our life's problems.
It's that famous phrase, Georgios. Procrastination is the friend who comes round, brings you a pizza and the new PlayStation game.
Yes, that is definitely a phrase I've heard you and people use in open conversation, unprompted.
First showed up in Shakespeare's play.
Yes.
As your drinky winkies it.
I thought it was Hamlet 2, the Hamleting.
It's true, where he doesn't make any decisions. That's why I like Hamlet. He doesn't make any decisions. He dithers. I see myself in Hamlet.
Right, naughty.
So, what does Troy Eisenberger say? That means iron burger, Georgios.
No, it doesn't.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine trying to bite into an iron burger? You'd have to be that bloke out the James Bond movies, wouldn't you? To try and eat that one, wouldn't you, Georgios? Or a robot.
God, I mean, I'm not the kind of person to wish ill on people. But ever since you've been, happy, your jokes have been awful. Double
funny, Georgios.
Horrible.
Hello, my name's Robot Man. I won't go for the tungsten burger today. I'll have the iron burger, please.
Are you aware that you've spent 5 times not saying the word Whitleys?
Would you like some metal relish on that? Just a little bit of rust, please.
I can't pick up the slack. I'm just not used to using cuss words. You have to print out a list. I have to listen to all the back episodes to print out all these cuss words you've been using just so we can keep our level. Do you know the kind of stress you're putting on me?
Georgios, I'm happy. Let me be happy.
No, you're boring.
What does Troy Ironberger say?
He says there always seems to be one single play that is the death blow to a game. At some point during that game, I'll zone out in a moment of existential crisis and ask myself, what am I doing? Why am I playing this game? It's yes and no. I think I know what he means.
Have you had this? Can you think of a game where this happens?
I tend to forget these moments because those are usually games I tend to forget because why, keep revisiting negative experiences in games. But yeah, I think I have had a few of those games where I sat down and realized, this gives me nothing. This is so familiar, so not even for me, the experience, the dynamics at the table, absolutely interchangeable with a game of a similar genre. I'm going to say the game that comes to mind, though I'm not saying it is bad, but the type of game, exemplifies the type of game, is The Adventures of Marco Polo. In that I don't think I've had this literally this experience when I played this game, but when I sit down and play a game, any generic Euro game, and I feel this is kind of like I'm getting the same kind of challenge. It's just the details are slightly off to The Voyages of Marco Polo. Why not play Marco Polo instead, if that may be the better game? Or why not? I mean, why, if I feel like these games are interchangeable, I end up with the same question. Why am I playing this game? Why do I bother learning a new game that's just going to give me the same experience as 4 or 5 other games I know?
Yeah, for me, so having this experience, there was one moment with Machikoro. I played Machikoro a lot, and then at one point I just said, I'm buying 3 fields, I'm buying a processing thing, I'm literally doing the same thing every time, and I'm close to winning or not, and it was just apparent that this game had very little depth and was instantly accessible, but after that completely ephemeral, and I just thought, I'm not going to play this game again.
It's basically a game of make your own slot machine.
Right.
Which is all it wants to be, all it is, but if you go in expecting something other than that, you're going to be disappointed.
And also there are moments when certain social deduction games end up just becoming who's got this character, and you end up going through the same promenade every time you play. And then I just go, no, it's dead for me now.
Oh, yeah. No, I see where you can sort of end up stuck in the same group dynamic, in the same circles of questions and answers. I agree with you in so far that I have yet to find a game that helps you break out of this cycle. That the only solution I've found when you end up in these situations is to completely rearrange the group, introduce new people, remove some that you've played this game too often with. I think that's the way to breathe new life into these kind of games. But even then, occasionally you run the risk of just indoctrinating, for lack of a better term, these new players into the old group thing.
Well, I think, with certain social deduction games, with every game, but with certain social deduction games, it just makes sense to go down this path first if you want to achieve the goal of the game. And once that path has been revealed, walking up and down that path is fine for a couple of times, but after you've seen the same robin and the same patch of cow shit on the corner next to the gate, well, it fails to have the magic that it once did, right? And so you're just kind of like, now it's done. It's dead.
Yeah. See, I'm interesting enough, I'm reminded of my experience playing the first season of Pandemic Legacy. I made a conscious and concentrated effort to back off from ever suggesting a root affection for my girlfriend.
Right.
I slipped up once and she called me on it immediately, but I think it comes down to the fact that even with these social deduction games, if you're experienced with this, if you've played the game a few times, you feel like this is the best way to go forward. And I think one of the things that we often forget about a game, especially if you're familiar with a lot of games, is that experimentation is just as much fun as is solving the challenge, as is beating the challenge. Trying things out, experimenting, exploring these things for the first time, seeing, like you said, that pile of cow shit for the first time, finding it on your own is just as rewarding as being told, look, there's cow shit, don't step in it.
But I think you can have there's sort of a related experience, sort of like the opposite side of the coin as well, I think, to some degree. Whereas, so I'll use Pandemic Legacy as an example. I played it with the same people for the whole campaign. And there was also that lovely moment where we'd ironed out our communicative kinks.
Right.
And we just kind of knew where we were at. And everything, decisions became very efficient, and it was a lift of the eyebrow or just a placing of the piece. Because all of that stuff had been spoken and respoken and rehearsed. Right. And I think in competitive games too, if you have a game that you play regularly with the same group of people, you can turn to some degree into a beautifully oiled machine of backwards and forwards where all of that stumbling and discovery becomes wonderful, efficient familiarity, and that can also be really rewarding too.
I agree. I think there's like The one game that comes to mind that is explicitly about reaching that level is Space Alert, which is all about making your communication more efficient.
Right.
Making it better, reaching that point that you just described. I'm not sure that Pandemic is designed for you to reach that point. I mean, you can, obviously. I do agree there's a certain pleasure in just being good at something and just, being efficient and just being great at something.
It's not necessarily good, it's just being at home with it.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to have ability to do it without the stumbling over the rules. The rules then fade into the background and it's just the game. So, Georgios.
Yes.
You speak the Polish, don't you?
Yes, because I have not actually done any cultural faux pas that might lead the Polish government to declare war on us, so let's try it this time.
So I'm going to ask you to present to us, the listeners, this name. Let's do this.
I'm going to go with Maciej Szczepiński.
So I'm going to go with Maciej Szczepiński too. Please, Maciej.
It's a sequel, right?
Exactly. Come on the guild. Tell us how much we mullered your name.
We mullered?
Mullered. It's a term meaning destroyed. It's nothing about religion, Georgios.
No, I'm kind of wondering whether it's a reference to current affairs, because I would like that.
Yes, how much we arrested your name. So what does he say?
Mullered the name. He says, well, it doesn't necessarily always kill the game. I have this pet peeve that I didn't know was as big as I imagined. Let's call it a bit of occasional negative interaction in games where there is almost none. It's the equivalent of a peaceful game of Agricola when suddenly someone plays a card that steals your sheep. Not cool at all.
I have a particular problem with one game that does this.
Right.
That almost all of its mechanics and the way it's played is sort of right up my alley. Building your own little thing and transporting that onto the board, getting a nice engine. And then it has these take that cards that just seem utterly out of keeping with the rest of the game. And we spoke to the designer, and he said it was a thematic consideration.
Right.
In that, in the world where there are corporations competing against each other, they do underhand things to try and destroy each other, which I think is very naive. I don't. I think they're a big cabal that work together to shag us all.
I think you're both wrong. I think they're both ignorant and incompetent, which is my sort of basic belief about humanity.
And this is Terraforming Mars. Those take that cards seem utterly superfluous and just souring of a really nice experience. And this is so I've no issue with take that in a game. I've no issue with attacking people in a game if the game is predicated upon that. It's when it's ostensibly something else and it just has this element that upsets what you're doing. Then that's when I take exception.
I think I agree with you. I think it's just I'm just realizing that I have these issues with some Eurogames that do the same thing, and the reason why I find them frustrating and not, and most of them frustrating is that it seems to me that the game asks you to focus on the challenge of putting together your plan, and the take that element is rarely part of your plan.
Yeah, and it's arbitrary. And whether someone decides to attack you or not is essentially up to them, and it's completely out of your control.
Well, yeah,
and so I mean, personally for me, I feel bitter about it when someone just attacks me seemingly for doing well. I hate being punished for doing the right thing.
It's a competitive game, and you should know what you're getting yourself into when you sit down at the table. Isn't that what you say?
No, but the point is, certain games say the competitive nature of this is engineering. It isn't competition, it's engineering. It's who's the best engineer.
Yeah, exactly. That was
it's
my
not
point.
Industrial sabotage.
Yeah.
And that's what gets me.
Yeah, no, I think we're generally in agreement here. I think if the game, the mechanics asks you to focus on engineering, if they ask you to focus, all right, make these decisions, make it more efficient, sort of plot out the actions you're going to take for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 turns, that's great. I can enjoy that. But if part of my consideration is only sort of, if you're forcing me to also dedicate a separate part of my thinking on how to not get stabbed in the back by the other players,
or to stab someone else,
then I'm not getting a lot of. I don't feel they work well together. I don't feel like I mean, I'm thinking of Civilization right now, the recent one, not the very new one supposed to come out next year, where you're kind of you can choose to ignore your military, but generally just pushing forward on any of those victory conditions will for the most part help you sort of build up your military as you go along. You can pay attention to it and be a bit more, focus on it just to make sure you don't get sort of blindsided by one of your neighbors. But for the most part, focusing on winning the game generally also includes making sure that you can defend yourself. And I feel a lot of these games that Maciej, I think, describes don't manage to pull that off. They feel like they're giving you two different things to worry about, where one is great fun and one is just handling frustration.
And one is the huge majority of the game, and they have this little appendage that all it does is annoy you. And it's the lack of integration that seems the unforgivable thing. Okay, so moving on to Ben O'Steen.
Yes.
So, he had a number of things. I'm going to read them out, Georgios, and you're going to tell me whether it kills a game for thee.
Okay.
So, when my decisions don't matter throughout the game or are completely obvious, taking away my agency in the game.
I would need an example for that. No, but I can't really think of a game where I would say this is what's happening. So I'm leaning slightly towards no. I kind of disagree.
I think certainly that's a bad thing, but there are very few games that give you no agency, like Snakes and Ladders or whatever.
Yeah, I think there are games where your decisions are not as... Well, the consequences of your decisions aren't as far-reaching as you would like them to be, or you assume them to be, or you expect them to be. And sometimes the decisions are too quickly overturned by what other players do, or just by the roll of the dice. That can happen, and if the game promises one thing and gives you another, that's frustrating. And in that instance, I would probably side with Ben. And that's
not me, I assume.
No, obviously
that's
not.
Never me, is it?
Never. I would agree that, if the game says, you can make meaningful decisions, you can make the things you decide early on will carry through the game, and you're not, victim to random chance at the end of the game, and then when you play it, the opposite is the fact. Then yeah, that would kill the game for me as well. But generally speaking, I don't think most games do that, and the games that allegedly do that, I probably wouldn't agree with.
So I realised I wasn't doing his accent correctly. That's not how Ben sounds. So
no.
Hey up, hello, how's it going?
That's how he speaks.
I know someone who talks like that.
When a game uses unpleasant stereotypes in art, Werfel Bonanza, for example, or as art that's questionable, Tanto Cuore with the naked ladies. Good examples of handling sensitive depictions are Freedom, Underground Railroad, Colonialism, that's how it's said, which pulls no punches about abstract evil you're doing, unlike a lot of colonial-themed games.
Are you going to start explaining a game now? I think I might agree, though the examples that come to mind are different. In that,
Tanto Cuore instantly put me off because I thought, my God, am I some dirty old man in a Mac?
Yeah, Tanto Cuore is crap.
Yeah,
it's just awful. It's
exploitative.
Yeah, it's one of the few games where I actually felt uncomfortable sitting at the booth trying it out because I've heard of it. And no, yeah, that was awful. I think the other one I remember was a mafia-themed game called Mob Ties, which has slightly cartoonish looking art, but not enough to make the inherent cruelty of what you're seeing on these pictures sort of go away. It was just really unpleasant. Not explicitly gory, not explicitly disgusting, but these were all moments, depictions of criminals torturing or brutally about to kill someone. I remember one of them is actually the cover where you see a bunch of, mean-looking men looking into a pig pen, and there's, I think, an arm reaching up for help as it's being eaten by pigs. And I was like, that's disgusting. You don't see anything. It's just the implication that's there, the sadism, the cruelty of it all. It's just, ugh. Yeah, but that killed the game for me as well.
When to arc of game is simply random.
No. Simply no. No. I think randomness can be a great liberating tool for a game experience.
I think we should move on from this, and I think we should look at it in greater depth at a later date.
Right.
Because we talk about this a lot, the dreaded M word that you seem to hate so much.
Which is?
Mitigation. And
I don't hate it. I think it's used unfairly at some point.
I think randomness is vital
Yes.
to an exciting experience, but the fun comes from your ability to try and handle that like you're trying to handle a ferret that wants to get out of your hands.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think generally I just appreciate handling the effects of randomness more than trying to keep randomness from occurring.
Yeah, if you don't offer me a way to handle randomness, which I might suggest that maybe is what Ben is saying, then that's an issue. Okay.
Yeah.
When take that gameplay is a core part of game, i.e. directly played effect against a single player without any real gain.
I'm not sure that the argument itself is true. I mean,
Take that's hard in a 4-hour game, not so hard in a 15-minute game, right?
maybe. I think Take That has a lot to do. Well, first of all, Take That always has a gain to you because you're keeping somebody from winning. And if somebody else can't win, it means you still have a shot. I think Take That works if what's at stake is not, destroying everything you've built up or you've spent quite a lot of energy into creating. Into your position in the game isn't destroyed just by a quick random card. I think we mentioned it a few minutes ago only. I think Take That in general can work. One of my favorite games that has strong elements of Take That is Chaos in the Old World. It's all about punching each other.
Blood Bowl Team Manager is all Take That, essentially. And it's a really, really good game.
Yeah.
You just need to handle it intelligently.
Yeah, the game needs to give you enough needs to keep telling you can come back from this and never give you this feeling of I spent all this effort into getting to this place and now it's all evaporated into nothing.
Okay, I'll read out one more.
Please go. That's definitely the highlight of my day today.
I can forgive unclear rules if they make sense in the end, but if the rules are logically broken, inconsistent, or if it is clear that the designer has done no math...
You're British. Ben, you're British, it's maths, not math. There's an S at the end.
Maybe he's not good at it.
About the game's probabilities, EU.
Oh, no.
That's what it says. EU.
No, it doesn't.
It says ooh.
That's different.
Anyway, carry on.
Well, let's go from the last to the first. So the last one, designer's done no math. I think, and maybe that's just my experience from the recent Essen, that doesn't happen anymore.
Well, I played Lagerstätten, and one of the big problems with the game is the designer had done no mathematics, and so...
Well, that's just really bad. Well, yeah.
There was no incentive to do certain things, because the maths just didn't play out properly.
Well, yeah, I think...
So large swathes of the game were just rendered futile, because there was no mathematics done. He hadn't costed things correctly.
Well, that seems like no playtesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's been my impression... that playtesting, quite a bit of playtesting goes into a lot of games coming out now. Of course, you'll always find one or two smaller scale publisher who rush the game out and try to sort of push the game out before it's done enough playtesting. You'll always have that, I'm sure. But for the most part, I think this has become a rarity.
No, it has become a rarity, and it needs to be rigorous, because if you cost things incorrectly, it's hugely unsatisfying.
Rules are logically broken, inconsistent. I find that difficult to quantify, really. I think rules can be logically inconsistent in regards to how they refer to the game's setting. There's a central metaphor and how you're supposed to understand the game. And Eurogames have been past tense, notorious for doing that. The entire criticism of pasted on theme is just that. Rules that don't really make sense within the setting of the game. You just, really need to come up with an excuse, Mariner's Law, to make them make sense, to make them work. It's not a killing blow for me, but I do feel like it's a designer not doing his job properly if they don't care about how these rules fit into what the game is supposed to show.
It's no problem for me whatsoever, but of course the great victory is when you can manage to do both, right?
Actually, I was going to go on a rant at some later point, but let's put it in here. No, I don't think we should elevate theme integration as this great art, just like what we shouldn't elevate a coherent plot as great art in a movie. It's what we should expect. That's my position. That's the point I'm slowly approaching. That I expect rules to be thematically coherent with the setting of the game.
We will talk about this at a later date. I don't agree with you, but I think your point is valid. I will say that much.
Well, that's nice. And what's the last one? Logically inconsistent.
What I find, I don't know whether he means this, but what really bugs me, and I guess it's the heart of fiddly, right?
Yeah.
You do this here, but X here, but it slightly changes if this happens.
You're right, yeah.
And I hate that. Inelegance and fiddliness, and I'm sure this is the core of many genres of games, and that's why I love the sort of slick, well put together Euro, because they're consistent, and I like that. I like knowing what I'm doing in situations and not having a million exceptions to that.
Yeah, I can see the exceptions argument. I was thinking more along the lines of rules that are just basically variations of the same idea, but you need to remember when this is a +1 when you do this, but it's a -1 when you do that. It's the same rule, but it's sort of inverted here, and it's the other one there, and it's doubled over here. And this is the kind of... I can sort of see calling this inconsistent, and while it's not a killing blow for me by any stretch of the imagination, it's a nuisance.
If a game is fiddly, it's almost assured to kill it for me, just because my short-term memory is so bloody terrible, I'll never remember, and I hate reading rules. I hate it. I think the written word is such a bad way to convey the rules of a game, and so I hate going back to the rule book constantly, and that will always kill a game for me.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure where I fall on the fiddly scale. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't.
Well, Georgios, I've had a couple of test tube cocktails. They're trying out the Christmas pudding flavour ones for Christmas, and they gave me them on the cheap because I'm the test pilot. And then I've got to go back and look at more wedding stuff. And frankly, Georgios, now I feel more reinforced by the booze. I'm looking forward to looking through some magazines.
It's like you're aging in front of me.
Georgios, I'm happy. Can't you let me just be happy?
No, you're not happy. You're just dull. Next time you're going to ask me, which one do you like more? Beige or that other shade of beige?
What's the other bloody shade of beige?
What
a silly question. Well, say goodnight, Georgios.
No, I'm going to try to inject some life into you. Maybe we can score some drugs here.
It's crass, unsophisticated, and emotionally manipulative. It's this week's review.
Settle down, everyone, settle down and turn to page 1 of your books. The Wars of the Roses was fought between which two houses? Anyone? Between House of York and House of Lancaster. Was also called the... Anyone? The Cousins' War. And could be roughly separated into how many pivotal battles? Anyone? Into 5 pivotal battles. During this time, the two sides would marshal their forces using... Anyone? Using tactical decisions to both send their units into the battlefield or use them to... Anyone? Use them to solidify the presence in the area. While the battles would often swing the dominant power in the northern lands, the Midlands, or the... Anyone? The Southlands. It was the units that would gather outside of those pivotal battles that some experts say determined the eventual outcome. One of the more unique aspects of those battles was the impact of the first offense or defense. Anyone? The first offense that would set the tone for the rest of the battle. In some cases, the defending militias would flee simply because their opponents seemed so overwhelming, when in fact all they did was put on a good show. In the end, the Cousins' War was decided through anyone. A simple majority of the 3 areas, although some believe that the war could have ended far sooner if either house had established dominance over all 3 disputed areas in Britain. Please now turn to page 2 of your history booklet. All the ways in which Winston Churchill was a prick.
Yeah. Skip to the end. It's the one sentence review. As tense as the seconds before a charge, and as joyful as a D-mob, the Cousins' War belies its size and delivers the oomph of a well-tamped musket ball.
Like a grown man trying to squeeze into his childhood school uniform, the Cousins' War seems needlessly constrained by its size, making the occasional moment of awkwardness stand out all the more.
Georgios? Ooh, what's that in the corner of the room?
I don't know, but it's eating peanuts with its nose.
So I have a question for you, Georgios.
Yes, I do look like Brad Pitt, and yes, I do get that a lot.
That wasn't the question I was going to ask, but I concur on both points.
Excellent.
Is this elephant a little tiny weeny pygmy elephant
Do not mock,
that you can have
do not
in the
mock
house?
the weenie of the elephant. It's dangerous.
Or is it a really big elephant who's just squeezed itself into a miniature coat?
Great. I find your thematic, introductions of these subsections amazing.
I write them, George.
Yes, I know.
A lot of sweat, a lot of thought goes into...
Lots of practice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, question is, Georgios, this game comes in a small box.
It does.
It has a small board.
It does.
A few cubes, a few cards.
A few of them.
A few dice.
Yes. Well, we use very, very pretty ones.
Is it a microgame?
No.
Elaborate, my love.
I think ultimately most microgames, at least the genre of the microgame, basically came to life as this attempt to distill an experience, maybe even a kind of genre, into tiny handful of rules, maybe even one central rule, and just add the absolute minimum of additional complexity to make it a game.
So you're saying then that the microgame it's not a matter of size, it's more of a mechanical idea, that it's a distillation of mechanics to one central idea.
Yes, and I think the size is just more of a stylistic conceit to express this mechanical rigorosity, which is now a word.
Rigor is the word.
You naughty boy. I think the microgame as such is mechanically very, very small, and it is expressed in few components, small game board. I think in this case the game components are small, but I think the game itself, has quite a few of rules on top of rules. Not too many. I think it's about an average sized game, but I would not be surprised, or rather I kind of would have expected a game like this to come in a mid-sized box.
So I have a question for you, because once you get going with the game, once you've understood the rules...
Which took me quite a while.
But once you do, we just played this now, and we got it done in like 20 minutes, right? Would you be annoyed to buy a full-sized game that you played in 20 minutes?
Oh no, it's a two-player game. I think I have quite a few two-player games that probably finish up in 20, 30 minutes. No, I think the size, from what little I know, which is literally nothing, I would guess most of it was a financial decision, a business decision to put out the game at this size. I think it had to do with how much budget is there, how can we sell it, how can we make it appealing to people who might be interested in that kind of game. And it had less to do with what's the best expression of the game mechanics. And I think both times when we played this game, because I've only played it twice, I was under the impression that this could and probably should be a bigger game with bigger, not miniatures, but at least more than just cubes. Quite a few times I noticed us sort of our thick old man fingers sort of accidentally pushing around cubes from one edge to the other. And it didn't seem like, I think the game would have felt a little more open, a little freer if there was just more space dedicated to it.
You see, and this is where we're going to disagree, I think, in that it feels like a microgame to me. It feels like a complex microgame. Well, not complex, a deeper microgame that doesn't... I think the game is aided by its size, in the fact that you have a map with 3 regions. Is able to boil down that complexity to a simple 3-region decision. A board that was normal size with just 2 lines cut through it and you have 3 regions would seem overly simplistic.
Like Memoir 44, you mean?
But then you have lots of hexes in between it, right, that occupy different things. You don't in this. You just have 3 big regions.
Oh, yeah. I think...
And that aids the simplicity of the decisions, simplicity of the mechanics. It feels like a microgame to me.
I think my point isn't that that it doesn't. Yes, let me turn this around. I don't think it feels like it doesn't feel like a microgame to me. It feels like a big game in a tiny box. Or not a big game, a regular sized game in a tiny box. And I think the board should be just a little bigger for ease of play. Really, there's no gameplay addition. The gameplay doesn't become deeper or more involved because the board is bigger. But I noticed I had to use the tip of my index finger to sort of slowly push cubes around for fear of accidentally pushing them over one side or the other. And I thought if it was twice the size, it wouldn't have been an issue. I could just place them with my full hand. We didn't have to worry. It's clear where I stand. Occasionally, I did need to sort of squint to see where is this red cube now exactly. Is it in the middle region? Is it the southern regions or wherever? So this is purely practical arguments coming from me. It's nothing about experience. All about a little bigger board would have been more helpful.
That's the thing, right? I mean, we rarely sort of talk about and focus on components in this show. And there are reasons I don't tend to talk about components particularly. Mm-hmm. But I think this is, the microgame thing is partially a component question. It's the miniaturization of things.
Definitely.
And a lot of people would say the goal of a micro. So you come from the angle that a microgame is not only a microgame in terms of its component size, mm-hmm. but in terms of its mechanical focus.
Yeah.
It focuses down onto one core thing. There are people who would disagree with you and say a microgame is simply a microgame because of its size. Mintworks is an example that it's supposedly, I haven't played it, but supposedly a full game.
Yeah.
It feels like a full game, but it's in a little box, makes it a microgame.
Yeah, but let's think about these tiny epic games. I don't think any of them are microgames, even though they're small.
I lean more towards your definition than I do to the simple question of size definition.
Right.
I think
we're men. We don't want to be reduced to size.
Indeed. Yeah. But I think, microgames have a mechanical aspiration as well as a simple size aspiration. This doesn't... It's a question of feeling gypped, I guess, in that it came in a ticket to ride size box. I kind of wonder, is there enough game here?
Yeah.
What having a little box gives you is allowing this game to exceed your expectations mechanically.
Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think I'm just looking over to your shelf and I see like a patchwork-sized box there. I can't read the name from here. And I think that would have probably been the perfect way of delivering this game. The board would be big enough. The cubes or the tokens would be big enough. The cards, if you wanted to make them big cards. I think this, if I were to sort of come up with weird ideas off the top of my head, I would think that this game would probably thrive from a deluxe edition on Kickstarter.
And, as I said to you the first time we played it, I said, often when I get these little games, I think about going down to Essen on the train. And would this work? This game, for me, has the depth, complexity, the engagement, but also its size. But this particular need is absolutely perfect.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
So, what did you think of my interactive, candid photo montage?
Well, it was certainly an experience.
So you've only played this game with me, Georgios.
I have, yes.
So I assume your experience of it was absolutely splendiferous.
I don't know what that word means, but I'm going to say no out of principle.
I assumed that would be the case. Never shall you disappoint me by offering me a compliment, Georgios.
Yeah, I was really torn the times we played this game, and I'm not entirely sure why. I was struggling quite a bit with the rules, interestingly enough, mostly with the combat rules themselves. I don't think they're particularly intuitive. I mean, you can sort of learn them and sort of memorize them, and then they kind of work, but I don't think they really fit the rest of the game. I mean, they're not bad by any stretch of the imagination. They're just a bit odd, and it does very much feel like two separate prototypes have been mushed together to form one complete game. One does only superficially influence the other,
basically the card play in the first half of the game, first half of a round, sort of sets up the combat, but the combat mechanics have nothing to do with anything else. They seem like their own little micro game. That was odd. I think that also added to this. That's also the reason why I didn't feel this was anywhere close to a micro game. And then, like I said, I struggled with the combat mechanics. I couldn't make sense of them. I mean, I kept asking them who loses what, and I kept misinterpreting them. But overall,
and by the way, just as a sidebar, regardless of all of that fucking lack of understanding, you still managed to fucking beat me twice.
Yes.
I give up, Georgios. I give up.
But let's go back to the experience, because I think overall, my experience was probably less enjoyable than yours, it seems. And I'm having trouble quite putting my finger on as to why. I think some of it comes down to the fact that I'm not particularly well versed in the history of the game, not the game itself, but the setting.
The War of the Roses.
The War of the Roses, yeah. So none of the cards had any meaning to me. To me, they were all just, mechanics. Like, I don't know how many cards are in the game, 16 maybe, 18. To me, they were just mechanics. They were just mechanics printed on individual cards with functions. They could have been abstract symbols.
I can smile and murder whilst I smile.
Georgios.
Something like that, yeah. And so it was a very mechanical game for me. And the mechanics, I kind of figured out what they were about, but it seemed all very disparate. All these cards either were very similar to one another with no meaningful difference, or they were sort of put together in a way that didn't seem to cohere to some sort of whole, something that I could make sense of. That said, I mean, it was playable. Oh, no, that sounds damning with faint praise. No, it wasn't a bad game. I just didn't particularly enjoy it because it felt mechanical, because it felt I was sort of pushing my luck here a little bit, but not really, because I had no idea of what... One of the most interesting things I think about two-player games is the fact that you can hone in on your opponent and try to figure out what they're planning, trying to sort of guess what the next step is going to be. And I never had this experience with this game. I never felt I had any idea of what you were planning. It was just, what am I planning? Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And that wasn't very satisfactory to me.
You see, I think we're going to disagree, broadly speaking, on this game, because this is one of the best games I've played in ages.
All right.
I am so satisfied with this game. From the first play, I adored it. I found it all very intuitive. I found the flow of the round really enjoyable. I found the build-up to the battle. So just to briefly, you have three phases. You have a phase where you give someone else a card. You have a phase where you play cards to basically set up the battle. Then you have a battle round in which you roll dice, and there's a certain sort of bluffing mechanic. I found they all flowed into each other really nicely. There are aspects to the cards where you want to play them, but you end up giving an action to your opponent. I find that really nice. I find there to be a lot of interaction, and I did find that I was able to not know, but make educated guesses as to what my opponent was going to do. All of those things you said you had a disconnect with. Because there were certain cards... This is familiarity, okay?
Okay.
I guess, partly because I've played it more than you. Mm-hmm. There are cards that play off each other. There are cards that give certain advantages if they're played together, or cards that can react to certain actions that your opponent makes.
Okay.
And knowing...
Is there a list of the cards and their effects in the rulebook?
I don't think there is.
So basically you have to... play it often enough to recognize the cards, and then you can sort of see.
I mean, I've played it 4 or 5 times. I mean,
all right, no, I'm not saying it's impossible.
Yeah.
Or,
I didn't find it such
a
big issue, and there are certain games that I just click with, and certain games. Now, not that I win, but that I understand how to play them. Not just okay, I play a card here, but why I'm playing that card, right?
Right.
And this one clicked very quickly for me, and I played it the day I got back from Essen. I didn't play many games at Essen, and a friend stayed with me that night, and we played a couple of 2-player games, and this was one of them. And I hate reading rules, and I read the rule book, and it didn't make sense, but the minute I started playing, it seemed very intuitive, very engaging, and had a real back and forth.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that. There was a lot of back and forth there, definitely. This wasn't a game where you sort of sit there and do your thing. In my case, it was simply your decisions were basically just randomizers for my plan. I never felt like I could
provoke you to do something. I never felt I could guess where you were going, go another direction. It was all very tactical. I was just looking at what's happening right now. What am I trying to get at? I had to make a decision fairly early on whether I wanted to win the battle or whether I just want to spread my influence around. I agree with you that the game gives you enough objectives or enough goals to play towards to give you direction, which is unfortunately not something that every game does or succeeds in.
It has a battle phase, right?
Right.
And you could be forgiven for having an inferior design, funneling everything towards that battle phase. And if you lose the battles, that's it, you lose the game. This is not the case in this game.
No, I appreciate that, yeah.
You can lose just now.
Yeah.
You didn't win a battle. You won one battle.
I won one battle, yeah.
One battle out of 5 and still won the game.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's interesting. And
oh, yeah, I agree.
I love feeling like a game is grokkable, and I love feeling like a game gives me options to play the game and the player simultaneously, and I felt like this game gave me that.
I agree entirely. I like that about games as well, and I literally did not have this experience with this game. I don't know what it comes down to. I do find it interesting, though. I'm not sure if it's just random chance or maybe there is something about it, but I think our experiences are similar with Guilds of London, in that you found it immediately grokkable while I struggled with it.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something about, English designers thinking in certain ways that just makes it easier.
I think
maybe not.
Maybe, I assume Tony Boydell had a hand in developing this game.
Right.
So it wasn't designed by him, but he had a hand in developing it. Maybe there's a certain Tony Boydell stamp that just clicks with the way I think.
Maybe.
So what do you get if you mix together sexual frustration, hatred of the world, and congenital stomach problems?
That's basically you.
That's design.
All right. So, first of all, we'll go to the big sort of nugget of design here. The one thing that is the most standout element of the game, and that's the battle system, the combat system.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to go to you and ask you why you had issues with it in a minute, but I just wanted to say one thing. I usually hate combat in games. I usually find what combat does is just grind the game to a halt. You play this entire other thing, and then you pick the game up and you carry on. I think here it solves that by having an entire phase that is devoted to it. So you know that's coming. So it doesn't interrupt the enjoyable stuff of playing the game to have a fight. It funnels towards that and then allows you to play that separate mini game, but in a separate phase.
I don't know. I think I felt the game did kind of slow down a little until I realized what's actually happening is that you're supposed to sort of divide your attention during the card play phase towards either the battle or the map, which are two separate entities in this game. And I think ultimately that's what happened in the final turn of this game we just played, in that you were devoted to the battle and I was devoted on the map, which helped me get the majorities. I think that's an interesting tension that's happening there. Still, I feel I continue to have issues with the battle mechanics.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you this now, and as honest as possible would be lovely.
Yes.
Do you think it's a failure of you or a failure of the mechanic? Do you think the mechanic is needlessly complex? And did that lead to you not instantly getting it, finding it intuitive?
I think it is.
Or there's a third option.
There is.
I explained it badly. There's also that third option.
No, I think it is. Like I said before, I don't think the combat mechanics are of one piece with the rest of the game. I think they feel very much out of place. They, like I said, like a prototype from another game that wasn't finished for whatever reason and ported into this one. There's an element. I mean. Let's talk about the simple part of the combat mechanics, which is the starting player rolls the dice secretly and then announces what they've rolled. There's this tiny bit of bluffing in it. So basically, and then the other player needs to respond and beat the roll they just had announced. And it's again mitigated by the fact that you have command points on a card that you still have in your hand.
You can lie and then adjust your dice.
You can adjust your dice.
And if you And if you don't lie and a person accuses you, like classic bluffing games do, they then lose cubes from the board, which puts them at a disadvantage.
Right. I feel like this entire part, even though I enjoyed the bluffing, seemed to be just an excuse to ever use for the last card, so you don't just discard it. Because if you remove this, it still works. It just, it becomes a pure dice game as opposed to, teasing one extra cube out of your opponent.
But I love this
Or just, announcing, or just announcing an attack that's almost unbeatable. And I don't know.
But I loved this element of, while I was playing the card phase,
right,
thinking, do I play this for its command points, or would this be useful to keep for the battle, because I'm then able to manipulate more dice? Because I think the beauty of it is, and this is, we kind of, when the first time we played, we were both a bit confused about this, and I wasn't sure about it, was, can you use all your command points on one die or not? And you can't. You can only use one command point per die to arrange them and lift them to the figure that you announced. I love that idea of, if I save this is really useful. This power here is really good. These command points are really useful right now. But if I save them for the combat, that gives me such flexibility in what I can announce, and fundamentally could win me the battle in one roll, I really enjoyed that.
No, I think it works. Like I said, I don't think the rules are in any way bad. It just, this is the point where I feel the game sort of stumbles, because the card play is clear. You play a card either for command points, which allow you to do certain things, or for the effect. Classic. I mean, I'm sure Twilight Struggle isn't the first game to have done this, but that's what it
And David Mortimer designed Twilight Squabble as well.
Oh, there you go. So basically, it's a very, very intuitive, very nice mechanic. It's easy to get. Then you have like these double effects, like during certain turns, your opponent gets an extra ability when you play that card. So that all works fine. This is all, I feel, of one piece. And then the combat starts, and none of this seems to matter. All of a sudden, it's about bluffing and about points, and it becomes impossible to discern whether someone is lying to you, other than, looking at their face, because up to 3 points can be changed. You have no idea of what they might have rolled. It becomes a pure guessing game. So the bluffing element, I think the first time I heard it when you explained the comment was, I thought, the bluffing element is interesting. And then I realized, it's just the first roll. It's not even, it doesn't go back and forth like Liar's Dice. It's just one roll. And then that one roll is mitigated by a card you don't know, by an amount you don't know, and it broke basically all these rules elements that might be used to affect the change of the dice effectively do not really pay off meaningfully, because as the opposing player, you don't know any of the factors.
One thing I would agree with you on is that I didn't find very often any reason to lie, especially. I could lie about what I rolled, but I wouldn't lie outside the scope of what my card could do to fix it.
So it wasn't lying?
Well, yeah, pretty much. It's not lying. I like the bluffing. I like the usage of the cards. But I agree with you. There's kind of no point to lying. Where I disagree with you, and it's a disagreement we'll not be able to convince each other of, I think, because it's a disagreement on feeling.
All right.
Is that you feel that this seems disconnected to the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Well, I feel that it seems intrinsically integrated to the game. And when I'm making decisions with playing the cards, even when the first phase, you get your handful of cards and you give your opponent one, all of that feeds into what is going to happen in the battle. Every phase leads to that for me.
But going back to that question you asked me about failure, so I don't want to use the word failure because I don't think the rules fail. I think they do what they're supposed to do. I think they're not as elegant and as clean, as intuitive as they should be. And as a way to not prove my point, but to illustrate my point and let listeners make up their own mind, can you please explain to me how, after the dice rolling, how combat works? How is combat resolved?
After the dice rolling?
Yeah, basically you rolled the dice, you did your bluffing.
Yeah.
So basically I said, you're not bluffing. And then I responded, and I rolled something. How does that work? What are the effects of the dice roll?
Well, it's very simple. It's like a sort of poker idea.
Right.
So you announce 2 2s.
Right.
Okay. I decide whether I think you're lying or not, then you reveal and you have 2 2s. Yeah? So you have, because you've got 3 dice, 3 levels: singles, doubles, triples. If you lose a level beneath what the person has declared, you lose 2 cubes.
Why 2?
Because it's a level beneath. Because this is what the rule is.
Okay.
So if I announce 3 threes and you roll 3 twos, you lose a cube. If I announce 3 threes and you roll 2 twos or 2 sixes or whatever, you lose 2 cubes because it's a level down. You lose an extra cube per level. If I roll 3 threes and you roll 1 6, you lose 3 cubes because 1 level, 2nd level, you lose an extra cube, 3rd level, you lose an extra cube.
All right.
I'm not being paid to explain bloody games here, by the way, Georgios, but that seems very intuitive and understandable to me.
Oh, no, I have no idea that you've understood
And the
it.
gestalt I have in my brain
no.
might be very, very different to how it sounds.
Yeah, maybe. But I think that it's pretty much how you explained it to me as well. And I don't want to it's not a criticism of your ability to explain or
I have no,
an admittance.
And by the way, I have no dice and have no game.
Yeah, no, obviously.
And so obviously I'm not able to use visual aids or visual cues to help.
Exactly. But ultimately I think this is pretty much how the game was explained to me. This is this explanation I struggled with. I couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't find it seemed rules for the sake of rules.
Why is the question you asked? Because is the only answer I can give.
Yeah.
And if you're going to conceptually have an issue with that, and it's not, I'm sure it's not you being deliberately belligerent.
No.
It's legitimate. I can't get this into my head because is never going to be a good enough answer. But why? Because that's the rule.
No, obviously. But again, I think the one I'm struggling with is the fact that 2 cubes do not hold any particular significance in every other aspect of the game. So why it's all of a sudden 2 when there's 1 point of difference doesn't quite sing the way that most elegant mechanics seem to sort of shift around the same number to make it easy to remember. So you have the significance of the number 3 and it shows up in all other equations in other parts of the game. That's what makes it easier to understand. So when you have one level of difference leading to losing 2 cubes that you've rolled with 3 dice.
I it's a shame that we've gone down this road because I know I have to finish it. But
yes, go on.
You lose a cube. You go up an extra level, you lose 2 cubes. It's not 2 cubes are significant, but you just an extra level adds a cube. Another level adds a cube. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3.
Yeah, now that obviously makes more sense to me.
Well, I wish I'd explained it like that in the first place.
Anyway, I think we've wasted a bit too much time on that. But yeah, my point is basically this: I struggle with this part of the rules, and my impression remains that probably could have used another design go to sort of polish the rules, make them easier, because that would have led to, in my mind, a smoother experience, a cleaner experience, and one that really flows as easily and straightforward as you would expect from something that lives in the vicinity of the microgame, without, in my opinion, being a microgame.
Yeah, and this is it. And I'm just going to say my last bit on it, because we're going over old ground. As I say, we're never really going to come to a consensus on this. Whereas it felt to me, and this is purely hippy-dippy feelings, it felt that it flowed wonderfully. It felt that it flowed intuitively, and I never at any point had an issue.
Playing this made me want to play.
What did this make you want to play, Georgios?
It reminded me of quite a few 2-player games, but the one it made me want to play, it first reminded me of was 13 Days, which we've also reviewed in an early episode. I was ambivalent about the game as well, and I still can't quite put my finger on why, and it bugs me. I like to know why I think what I think, or feel what I feel, and I can't figure it out with 13 Days. But the game it actually makes me want to play is not 13 Days, because I've sort of made my peace with the fact that it just doesn't connect with me. But the game makes me want to play is part 3 of the Cold War trilogy by Asger Granerud and
Daniel
Peterson. Thank you. I was about to call him Peter Danielson, which of course are the other Danish designers.
Yeah, it's a good name though.
Yeah. Apparently 13 Minutes has gotten some mixed responses. But Iron Curtain, which is the one I'm thinking of right now, seems quite interesting. I've seen it played when we were at Essen, at the table right next to me, when Asger introduced it to 2 people at the meetup or the lunch, the dinner. And it seemed interestingly involved, but not too much so. So I'm very eager to sit down and try that one. Maybe this is the Cold War game that works for me.
Yeah, I sometimes use this as to sort of plan evenings And it's sort of impractical because it's a 2-player game followed by a 4-player game. But this game really makes me feel like playing Inish.
All right.
There's that, because both games, I think, have this back and forth. Both games have this area control manipulation. And both games have the ability, I think, to have a person convinced they're going to win and at the last minute having the rug pulled out from underneath them and realise that they've bloody lost.
Did that happen to you?
I refuse to talk about this, Georgios. But I love that.
Did it happen to you twice?
I'm not speaking to you anymore. This is a monologue to the listeners. But I love that. I love that predictable unpredictability, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And this game really makes me want to play that and then get Inish out and play that. I think that would be a hell of a night.
That's interesting because I think I see what you're going for with Inish. I sort of agree. And I think this might be the ultimate difference of opinion on this game, in that all the qualities that I also appreciate about Inish, I don't see in this game. And you do. And I think that's ultimately it. I think if you can make the Cousins War work in a way of plotting and strategizing and tactically maneuvering and sort of responding to offenses and, putting up your defenses and plotting out a course for the later turns, then I think that works great. It didn't for me, even though I like it in general, it just, that game just didn't open up to me in that way.
Fear has subsided, Georgios. No longer are we under the grip of the horror of Samhain. We now move into approaching the festive period of lights, hot drinks, and baubles. And I, for one, Georgios, feel love towards my fellow man. That's why I want them to contact us. And how would they do that?
I'm still not sure if you're just trying to get them to play Inish with you or not.
Just any human contact, Georgios. Any human contact. I'm so lonely, Georgios.
See, I'm not laughing. See, I'm laughing at you, not with you.
That's good.
Clear.
Yeah, just so we're clear.
Yes, they can contact us by writing us an email at infoperfected@gmail.com. They can @ us on Twitter @infoperfected or perfectedinfo. They can look at our pictures on Instagram, Perfect Information. They can Facebook us on Facebook in a Facebook group by Facebooking, which is the Perfect Information Podcast. There are also still slots open on the Guild, yes, on Board Game Geek, the Guild of Perfect Information, number 2348, and there are even more slots open on our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/perfectinformation. And I think that's most of it. I'm not giving out my phone number.
Docstastic. Yeah, so I just want to say, if you think we're good, if you think we're worth it, support us on Patreon.
If you think you're sexy.
I think you're very sexy, Georgios. But I'm going to go away now, and I'm going to think about the lovely Christmas joy that we brought into my heart by crass consumerism.
Christmas is quite a bit away, though.
Say goodnight, Georgios.
No, I'm going to try to teach you how to read a calendar.